But then there's more stuff that comes, and there's more activities that come around, and more responsibilities, and we've got this basketball game to go to, and not to pick on your thing. Friday nights are consumed, and everything. When would I have time to do any of this stuff? But then before we know it, another year has come and gone. Another year has flown past us. And in fact, I hear a lot of people say, where'd the time go? I just watched life pass right past me. I can't go a day without watching something with Kemery and say, I don't want to miss a thing. Because everybody tells me when children grow up, they just grow up so quick. And you just got to stay watch. You got to keep focused. You got to watch everything they do. And I want to do that because it's fun. But I don't want to watch it just fly right past me. But what is our gospel lesson really trying to tell us? I saw this quote, "Wake up and smell the coffee before you're dead and just smell roses." How true is that? How true is that? We need to wake up. And if you're asleep, get some Java after church and we'll talk. There's plenty of coffee out there. But the best coffee is brewed right in this house. This is Jesus coffee, folks. This is the best thing you're ever going to get. But we need to wake up. We live in very uncertain times, don't we? There's a lot of things going on around us. Proof is in the pudding, they say. Look at North and South Korea. I hate to say it, but are we headed towards World War III? If you ask North China and Kim Jong-il or whatever his name is, he probably wants it to be that way. Everybody's fighting over these body scanners at the airports and these kidnappings that are going on down in Mexico and now starting to filter over to us in Texas and Arizona, and all these elevated attacks that are going on around us and all this terrorism. How do we find peace in all of this? As we look at our Advent wreath this week, we've got peace and hope. I see those two words and people ask, how could there ever be hope? How can I find joy in any of this? Well, let's go to John. So let's get our Bibles out. Let's open those Bibles to John 16. John chapter 16. John chapter 16, we're going to go to the 33rd verse. John chapter 16, verse 33. Let's hear these words of Jesus. I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. I love that first part. I have told you all this so that you may have peace. Jesus bringing peace into our life. Jesus bringing the peace that through all this hustle and all this bustle and all these things going on, He came so that we might have peace. I want to read you this story. It's called Wally. I love this story. A flock of wild ducks were flying in formation, headed south for the winter. They formed a beautiful V in the sky and were admired by everyone who saw them fly by. One day, Wally, one of the wild ducks in the formation, spotted something on the ground that caught his eye. It was a barnyard with a flock of tame ducks who lived on that farm. They were waddling around on the ground, quacking merrily and eating corn that was thrown on the ground for them every day. Wally liked what he saw. Sure would be nice to have some of that corn, he said. All this flying's making me tired and hungry. I'd just like to waddle around for a while. So after thinking it over, Wally left the formation of wild ducks, made a sharp dive to the left, and headed for the barnyard. He landed among the tame ducks and began to waddle around and quack merrily. He also started to eat the corn. The formation of wild ducks continued their journey south, but Wally didn't really care. I'll rejoin them when they come back on the north on their next trip in a few months. Several months went by, and sure enough, Wally looked up and spotted the flock of wild ducks in formation headed north. They looked absolutely beautiful up there. Wally was just waddling around in the barnyard. It was muddy and everything, everywhere he waddled, but nothing but duck doo-doo. "It's time to leave," said Wally. So Wally flapped his wings feverishly and tried to get airborne, but he had gained so much weight from all his corn of eating that he had not exercised very much and couldn't get his wings to fly. He finally got off the ground, but he was flying too low and slammed right into the side of the barn. He fell to the ground with a thud and said to himself, "Oh well, I'll just wait till they fly south in a few months. Then I'll rejoin and become a wild duck again." But when the flock flew overhead once more, Wally tried and tried to lift himself out of the barnyard. He simply didn't have enough strength. Every winter and every spring, he saw his wild duck friends flying overhead. And they would call out to him, but his attempts to leave were all in vain. Eventually, Wally no longer paid any attention to the wild ducks flying overhead. He hardly even noticed them. He, after all, became a barnyard duck. You know, it's an interesting story to hear about Wally. And then I think about Advent. Advent is all about preparing our hearts, but also preparing our homes, but preparing our family. It's about preparing for Jesus coming. You know, just like Wally, we get very distracted in life, don't we? Things in our life just pull us away from what we know. Sometimes we lose touch with reality, and then sometimes we lose touch with our Christian faith. And as our gospel said, we need to be ready at all times. We need to make sure that we stay focused. You know, for a lot of people, life can be extremely overwhelming. How do I do this? How do I do that? How am I going to deal with all this stress of Christmas? You know, Christmas is like eating an elephant. How do I do it? How do I get through this? How do I eat this elephant in front of me? Well, there's one very simple answer. We eat it one bite at a time. We don't try to gulp the thing down in one big bite. We take that elephant and we take one bite at a time. And it's kind of like Easter when you get those chocolate ducks. You say, "How am I going to, it's so big, how am I going to get through it?" But you take one little bite now, one little bite later, and before you know it, at the end of the day, it's gone. It's out of here. And then you got a bellyache and you're paying for it later. But isn't that about life? You know, here we have this big elephant in front of us, and how am I going to eat that elephant? Jesus gives us that answer. We need to prepare. We need to wait. We need to remember and slow down and think about the reason for this season. If we're getting ourselves wrapped up in all these gifts that we're going to give, are we thinking in the right way? Are we thinking, you know, my grandkids got 13 gifts apiece last year. I have to get them 14 because they'll not be satisfied if I don't get them 14. They'll say, "But Grandma and Grandpa, you got me 13 last year. I needed 14 this year."